Welcome back, guys, to my part 2 video helping you decide if Colombia is the right country for you. From an expat that's been living here for 12 years, I have lots of tips and tricks and information about what it's really like living here, all the pros, all the cons, and I'm going to give you my very honest feedback on what life is really like in Colombia. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, that's totally fine. You don't have to watch these videos in order. You can watch them in any order, but go check it out after this one. In this video, we're going to cover this list of topics that you see on screen. Now, just a reminder that these are my personal experiences and observations from my time living in Colombia. They are not intended to be criticisms. They're here to help you decide if you could comfortably live in this country based on its pros and cons. And for those of you who stick around till the end, I'll spill the tea on one of the worst customer experiences I've had in this country, so that hopefully you can avoid similar problems. But overall, I love Colombia and I hope you will too. After watching these videos, I hope you can decide if Colombia is the right place for you to come to visit as a tourist, or maybe to come here to live or retire. I've got lots of stories to share with you, not only the positives and the negatives, but also a few funny little stories from my years in this amazing, amazing country. So let's begin. First up is one that is very interesting and perhaps one that you haven't heard much about if you've not been to Colombia, and that is the innovation, and especially for this city, Medellin, which back in 2016 was voted the most innovative city in the world. And if you come here, it's not hard to see why. The metro, or the public transport system of Medellin, is fantastic. It is so efficient, so affordable, one of the easiest ways to get around the city, which is quite spread out. But taking the train is super fast, much faster than going by car or taxi at many times, especially in peak hour. But also they built cable car lines and also escalators in some of the neighborhoods where people used to have to walk up and down mountains, really, really steep mountains, and it would have been hundreds or even thousands of steps. Imagine doing that every day going to and from work. But since those were installed, it really has created a better quality of life for many of the residents of this amazing city, and also for the tourists. I'm going to provide more information about the innovation of Medellin City, and be sure to check the video description below for other links that I provided for the topics I'm talking about in this video today. Now let's talk about culture. I'm not sure if you know this, but Colombia has a city called Cali, which is the world capital of salsa. So if you're into dance, especially salsa, you should definitely check out Cali. There are many amazing festivals throughout the country, and coming up very soon in one of my next videos will be a video about the Feria de las Flores here in Medellin City. It is the biggest event on the calendar for Medellin, apart from their Medellin Christmas lights, which is also incredible, and I've made a video about that here. And there are so many different kinds of music if you're a music lover, from vallenato, pop, reggaeton, and many others. Now let's talk about one of the cons, and that would be technology and websites. It's a frustrating one. I have problems with the websites and the apps on my phone for even the banks in this country. You know, the services that you need more than anything else would be access to your own money. And there are times when you cannot even send a money transfer because the bank application is out. It's stopped working for maybe several hours, maybe a whole day. And it's extremely frustrating. And there are other things that just a little bit annoying. You know, for some reason, payments and transfers and things like that, when you make a payment, it doesn't always reflect immediately on the website that you made the payment to, or on your own bank records. Everything seems to get updated at midnight, which is kind of a really old-fashioned system. But, you know, it's just one of those little details that's annoying, but you can learn to live with it. I just wish the banks would get their shit together, because when you can't even access your own money, that is one of the worst things. You know, if you need to make an urgent transfer or something and you can't even access the application, it's extremely frustrating, especially considering some of the biggest banks in the country have these issues, and it's ridiculous. Back to my next pro, and in my opinion this is a very big pro, and that is doctors, healthcare, and the medical system. Depending on how much money you earn, the amount of money that you pay on your healthcare can vary, but nevertheless it's usually very, very affordable. The medical systems here are very good. The doctors are well trained. I have a couple of friends who are doctors, and they've told me that yes, there is nothing to worry about here when it comes to the medical system. The doctors are awesome. I had to have a surgery here once and it went really well. My healthcare will be covering an upcoming surgery I'm going to be having, and it includes most medications as well. So if you need to go to a doctor, you can go comfortably knowing that you're in very good hands. My dog got the zoomies. Now I realize that I haven't actually been doing this in the order of pro, con, but I will be going back to some of the pros at the end of the video. But let's move on to another con that has been a real big one for me, because It's frustrating. Many years ago when I was in Australia, I've worked in service industries. I've done many customer service jobs. So I know what is good customer service. And unfortunately, in many industries here in Colombia, good customer service is either lacking or just completely non-existent, including an experience I had just yesterday, which I'll tell you about in a second. Now, of course, I'm not going to say customer service is bad everywhere, because that's completely not true. You can get good customer service, and especially in the service industries, like if you're staying in hotels or if you're going to restaurants, there's probably more of an incentive in those industries because, there's expectations to offer good customer service. And in restaurants, perhaps some of the staff expect tips, so the service is going to be better. But in other industries, like when you're trying to make an appointment, when you're dealing with some receptionists and things like that, I just find that sometimes you get this kind of attitude that the staff just do not care because there's not much of an incentive to give good customer service. An example is that I've been trying to make a very important medical appointment recently because I have a surgery coming up, and I've been contacting this clinic for weeks and weeks and weeks and still no appointments available. And I was just trying to get an update, like, when will one be available? And the answer was something just really short, like, it's like, you'll just have to keep on contacting us. And I got a little angry about it, and I was like, well, how about you contact me, because I've contacted you three weeks in a row. I'm wasting hours of my time waiting for just an update on something so simple. And I said, I would like to make a complaint about this. Can you pass on my complaint? And the response was simply, fill out this form with a link. Like, no, oh, we're so sorry for the inconvenience. No. That kind of customer service, unfortunately, in many industries here, it just doesn't exist. You don't get apologies, you don't get polite service, and it can really bug you. Customer service is one of the things that has probably receded my hairline from here to about here, where it is now in Colombia. Now, as I said, these are just my personal experiences, and I'm not criticizing everybody. Of course, every business is different, every industry is different, so you can get very good customer service. But I'm just talking about some of the rare cases when you do get very bad customer service. And it's frustrating, especially if you don't speak Spanish very well. So if your Spanish level is not so good, you may need some help from a Spanish speaker if you need to deal with these kind of situations. So that is a frustration that you're going to have to be aware of before you decide if you want to come here to visit or spend a long time or to perhaps retire. Stick around to the end, because I do have another customer service story, which is a bit of a doozy, and yeah, I'll share that one with you. I'm still angry about it a year later. Okay, now let's move on to the infrastructure, which can be a pro and it can be a con, because if you're living in a big city like Medellin, this one, and in Bogota, and I imagine a few other bigger cities around the country, the chances are you're probably going to have very good infrastructure with stable internet, stable electricity, no problems with water supply, things like that. However, I have lived in some rural areas and some smaller cities, cities with about 500,000 people, and some towns which just had a few thousand people. And oh my God, there were times where it felt like it was a cycle. It was like one day there would be no water, the next day there'd be no internet, and then the next day the electricity would go for half a day, and it would just happen so frequently. And that is really hard to get used to, because imagine, when you're living, in my case, hot and tropical city. Imagine that when you're in that kind of temperature and you want to have a shower to cool down, and you turn on the tap and there's no water. And sadly, this is the way of life for many people in rural areas, and unfortunately the infrastructure is not really changing at a fast pace. If you are planning to live in most of the big cities, like you probably will if you come to Colombia, that shouldn't be a real issue for you. Here in Medellin, I very rarely have any issues with any of my services. In general, if you're going to live in the big cities, infrastructure is quite good. Let's talk about another con, and that's bureaucracy with Let's talk about another con, and that is bureaucracy with government departments and also with other companies that you're dealing with. Oh my God, it can be so difficult to get something so simple done. I think about in Australia, like if I needed to change my phone number or my address or so on with my bank or any government department, it could be done in a 5-minute phone call, or it could be done with a simple online chat or something like that. Or I could do it myself through an application on my phone. But here in Colombia, if you want to just change something as simple as your phone number number or your address with your bank, it's a process. You have to literally fill out forms, do a request. It may be done in 2 days, it may be a week, it may be 2 weeks. Sometimes you don't get a reply at all, so you don't know if it's happened at all. And these are the kind of things that are really time consuming and frustrating, because you have to follow up on them to check that they're done. Those kind of things are again, quite painful. There's a lot of steps and processes to get really, really simple things done. And when you're applying for things like visas and things like that, it can be a real nightmare. And if you're planning on buying a house, please get lawyers involved. Make sure you're doing everything the right way. Having a lawyer would really, really save you a lot of time and energy and stress, because there's just so much bureaucracy and red tape and difficulties and challenges, and it's never going to be easy. So get a lawyer, and that will be the best advice I can give you if you're planning to buy property and live here long term. All of those things I just mentioned above have been the greatest teacher in patience. Being Australian, I've grown up with good customer service in my country. Things are a bit more efficient. So when I first came to Colombia, I admit I was quite short-tempered and frustrated, because I expected things would be done quickly. But coming here, having to just learn, okay, things happen at a different pace here. There's no point getting frustrated about it, because I can't change the way the whole country operates. So it has been the best lesson in patience. And I think 12 years later that I've been in this country, I don't get so worked up like I might have when I first came here. I just get a little frustrated, like I did recently with the company when I was trying to make a medical appointment. But you learn to let go of that tension and stress and frustration a little easier, because you've had a bit more experience at it. Okay, let's move on to the last one, which is a positive, and that would be the cost of living. Now, obviously the cost of living has increased quite a bit over the last couple of years since the pandemic. I've noticed an increase in food costs, for example. I'd say between 80% to now 120, 130% compared to the prices of 2021 to now 2024. Prices have really skyrocketed, but again, that's happened in many countries around the world. In general, you can actually live fairly well, depending on your budget, depending how much you earn, depending on your savings. If you have a retirement fund, you can live quite comfortably on around 1,500 to 2,000 US dollars a month. Again, depending if you're going to be paying rent, because that would take a bit of a chunk of that money away. But if you were to buy a property, you could live comfortably 1,500 US dollars, $2,000 a month to cover all your basic costs, including your bills, medical insurance, buying food, a little bit of travel from time to time as well. Obviously, everyone has different budgets and different lifestyles, and if you have more money to spend, then of course your quality of life is going to be much higher. The costs of food and the cost of rent are still quite reasonable compared to other countries around the world. For example, what I would have paid for 1 week rent in Sydney, Australia, where I was living when I was last in Australia, for 1 week, I would spend the same amount and have a 3-bedroom apartment to myself, and that I pay the same amount for 1 month. So I'm paying about a quarter of the rent, and I get a bigger space. So I think Colombia is, in general, very good value for money, especially considering Colombia has so many industries, such as clothing industries and shoes and things like that. So you can buy these kind of products that are very good quality at very, very good prices. What's that you say? Nice shirt, Ben? Well, this shirt is actually my design. That's right, I designed it myself. And the only place in the world you can buy this shirt and many others is in my very own Etsy store, which is based in the USA, but we ship internationally. Go check it out. The link is in the description box below. Now, for those of you that have stuck around to the end, let me share with you my #1 worst customer service experience of my life to date. Now, customer service can be kind of hit and miss, because depending on the industry and the business and so on, you can get very good customer service, of course. And in some rare cases like this one, you can get very, very bad customer service. Basically, what happened is about a year ago, when I had a visitor from Australia, we went to a city at the very south of Colombia, where Colombia meets Brazil and Peru. We stayed at a hotel that was a little out of the city of Leticia. We had a really bad experience, because basically we'd booked everything online through a third-party agency. And when we went to check in, even though I had the email with all the evidence of what we paid for, this very, very, very rude and unhelpful manager that was on the front desk refused to accept my booking, because the details in his system were incorrect. Because what had happened is the agency had sent my booking to the parent company of this hotel, but somebody there had made an error. When he showed me the reservation, it had my name, but it had my incorrect ID number, my incorrect phone number, my incorrect address, everything else was wrong. And basically we had paid for everything, included all meals and drinks. And he was just stating that, no, we'd only paid for breakfast and that's all we were allowed to have. And this hotel was out of the city, so there were no other options around. So basically he was expecting us to pay again, which was ridiculous. And we were refusing, and I was arguing with this guy and I was saying, this is terrible. You know, who argues with a customer about this kind of situation? The client in this case is not wrong. I've worked in hotels myself years ago, and if I was working on reception, if there was some sort of discrepancy, I would take that on board and I would try to resolve the problem. I would contact the booking company, I would contact the parent company of my hotel, I would try to figure out what the problem was, because it's not the client's fault that there's an error if my booking showed something different to what was on their system. This man was so rude and so unhelpful, and I could see the frustration in his eyes because he just did not want to help me. I just believe that people like that should not be in customer service. I don't know how they last. I don't know whether he was just really rude and unprofessional and that's the way he was as a person, or if this is something that comes from higher up in a company like that. Because if managers are taught to deal with customers like that by saying, you know, it's basically your problem, you deal with it. And by the way, it was a weekend, so I couldn't contact the companies to try to resolve it. It was ridiculous. But if that's what's coming from the top of the company, then that's a really big problem. That's where you lose customers. The point of this story is, if you come to Colombia or many other countries around the world as well, just be very careful, have your evidence, and before you book, always check the reviews of these places. I actually booked this place because it was recommended to me by a Colombian friend who had stayed there, and he'd had a good experience there. So I trusted his advice and I booked there, but I did not have a good experience, and neither did my friend. It was awful. That kind of situation can really ruin your whole vacation. Fortunately for us, the staff there didn't seem to be very well trained, even in the restaurants. So we went and had all of our meals and drinks anyway, because nobody knew that the tag that they gave us was just for breakfast. And I didn't care if they wanted to argue. I still had my evidence saying that I'd paid, so I didn't do anything wrong or illegal. Obviously, I wasn't stealing, I'd paid. It was just disgusting service. I had filmed that hotel as part of my 4-part Amazon series, which you can watch if you're interested. I'll put the links in the video description. Basically, when it came to editing, I decided to edit out everything about that hotel because I didn't even want to mention them by name, because I don't want to send them any customers. They don't deserve it. Basically, that would have been free promotion for them, but hey, if your customer service is so terrible, then you don't get any promotion. I just want to let you guys know, not only should you check places like TripAdvisor for reviews, you know, it's very normal that there's always going to be a couple of bad reviews, but if you're seeing a really high number of negative reviews, then that could be a red flag that perhaps you shouldn't stay there. Also go to the Facebook page of these hotels, because sometimes you might get even more reviews because a lot of people complain directly to the hotel. Check the negative and positive reviews on the Facebook pages as well. So that was my really bad experience, which unfortunately just happened in Colombia, but it can happen anywhere in the world. That's all for this video, guys. If you've had bad customer service experiences similar to that in hotels or anywhere else in Colombia or abroad, and you just want to vent, tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories so we can release some of that frustration together. And thank you so much for watching this video, guys. I hope you've enjoyed part 1 and part 2. Again, if you haven't seen part 1, go watch it next. There may be a part 3 depending on if you have more questions for me. Maybe the part 3 can be a Q&A. So drop your questions in the comment section below, or you can also send them to me on Instagram @abroadwithben. Thanks a million, guys. I really appreciate all your support. See you in the next one.